Money, Murder, and Minnesota. The Fantasmagorium is proud to present that show. I said it backwards. A retrospective and review of all things Fargo. This cold gang war is getting pretty hot. The Fada's house is out of order and the cannons lost a doctor. Let's see how the chips fall when negotiations become aggressive. The award-winning Coen Brothers executive produced and Noah Hawley run FX series of Fargo is what we are here for, so let's go. Kat is here. I am Scotty R37, and Steve would like a piece of cake.
That he would.
What's going on, Kat?
Not much. I've been reading and doing other things, and then it's like, oh, Fargo.
Well, I'm excited. I'm excited for this season because I also know that once we get through this season, the gold standard starts arriving. But I'm not bored by the show. I really do enjoy the cast and the performances.
Okay, yeah, the cast is fine and the performances. It's just kind of, to me, it kind of continues, kind of, okay, we're putzing around, we're moving along, but again, I still feel the ensemble's too big, and you're trying to top season 2 with another mob war story, and you're just not doing it. And, you have quirky things like Jason Schwartzman doing this comedic version of Al Pacino from The Godfather, because he's not, clearly he's not cut out for the job, but he pretends to be. You have the man-child looking Gaetano, the way he acts, which is just weird and frankly not that intimidating, but other people just take it. And given how easy characters can go around just shooting places up, it makes you wonder, without getting in trouble, it makes you wonder, why doesn't somebody just from the Cannon family just follow the guy home one night and just be done with it? Just pop the guy off and be. It's like there's no, based on everything we've seen happen so far in this series, and especially in these 2 episodes, without any law enforcement kickback, it's like. Whereas the things which do get law enforcement kickback are really minor by comparison. It's like I don't get the story logic and how they're treating this like a huge issue. The 2 crime families, like you could both easily solve this, with a drive-by or something. It just, I don't know.
Well, the entire thought of the truce between the Fadas and the Cannons is based on the traditional sun swap, if you will. And I thought that was supposed to be the insurance policy that would make it so that they wouldn't lash out at each other irrationally. But it doesn't seem to play much until episode 6. We finally do see what could go, what the intended result is. But then we have the rabbi, who is the guardian angel. Spoilers for Fargo season 4, by the way. You have been warned. Spoilers. But it seems that the crux of the season was introduced, and then it kind of hangs there, but it doesn't really have any consequences.
Right.
Chris Rock is great. The actor who played Dr. Senator is great. We should probably just go through because with the pressure that's being put onto the Cannons by the police and the Fadas, which is sort of an interesting dynamic. But these 2 episodes, while engaging, it is, okay, I can't wait for something to happen. And I did get one of those moments in each episode, but it was just an hour waiting for one thing to happen.
Right. And that's kind of my issue with the season overall. It's like you've had a lot of setup, lots of exposition, because your ensemble is so big, it's taking forever to move around. Like, I feel with these 2 episodes, we've basically forgotten about the Areta May character and the Ethel Rita character. They're just, like, not even relevant, really, in these 2. It's like, and that's because you have this huge ensemble, and they're not really all related to each other, like, story-wise. So it's just kind of teetering along and going nowhere at certain times. It's like, I'm not really as invested in this as the show wants me to be. But I guess with that, I'll start it off. It begins with Otis, the corrupt cop, arranging a police raid on a nightclub where the Cannons and all their other friends, black nightclub people, like to hang out. And you see Gaetano and the other Fadas watching from across the street, thinking, aha, this is great. And meanwhile, across town, Lloyd Cannon is doing his deal with Mort Kellerman of the Fargo Syndicate, where they're selling all the guns. He's like, sell them at cost, but they're going to owe us a favor later if this becomes a mob war. And conveniently, just as the trucks are driving away with the guns that they've just sold, Otis shows up there with the cops to raid the place, and they start smashing things in the warehouse, like, oh, we're all tough or whatever. And Loy is not really intimidated or bothered as they start arresting people. And it's clear Otis was originally going to leave Loy alone. But then Loy's like, hey, I know you. He's like, yeah, you're Otis. And he's like, huh? He's like, yeah, you served in the war. You were a minesweeper. And he gets into this really great, like, soliloquy, if you will, about how he would go about his job, having to, check all the mines for the guys up ahead. And you just got sick of it, or you were a coward. And so one day you just decided to literally lie down on the job and not do shit. And then when your colonel or your general, whoever it was, came along and asked if it was safe to go take a leak in the field, you said yes. And then he got blown to smithereens. And that's how he just started developing his OCD after that. And at first, I didn't really pick up on why that would lead to OCD. That, okay, he got scared or a bit lazy, or a combination of both, and that his boss or his superior officer dies. But that's kind of what's going on. And you could tell from Otis's reaction that is where he got his OCD from. And Otis tries to get in his face, but Loy ain't backing. So Otis decides that he's going to take the bag of money that Loy has been paid for with Thurman and take it away. Like, oh, I'm going to deal with you, whatever. So Loy goes home, and his wife is very upset, and she's getting her coat on because their other son, was amongst the guys arrested at the nightclub. And Loy surprisingly wasn't that upset with the guy who took his son to the nightclub. Like, that guy was thinking, oh God, Loy's going to kill me or whatever, but he didn't. He just get out of here, whatever, it's fine. But when he gets home, there's this great scene where Loy's mother's sitting on the couch kind of knitting this quilt, and his wife is putting on a coat ready to go save her son. He's like, Loy Cannon, you know better than to get between a mother and her son. And he's like, no, what are you talking about? Like, I'm going to handle it. I'm going to handle it. Trust me. No, you're not going to handle it. This is blah, blah. And they go back and forth for a bit. And finally, Loy's just had enough of it. And he puts his foot down and he says, you like that coat you're wearing? Do you like the view from your window, Mama? Do you like this house, the food that you're eating? Where do you think all that shit comes from? From saying our prayers? It's like, no, it comes from what I do and the job I do. And it doesn't just stop. You can't just back out. You have to keep working for it. And he finally... So he basically tells her off and says, no, get back in the kitchen and get me a cup of fucking coffee. And she realizes that he's right with everything that he's yelling at her about. So she reluctantly tries to save face as she takes off the coat to go in the kitchen. And then he turns back at his mama, who was just saying, to everything the wife had been saying. And he's like, well, am I gonna get a for what I just said, Mama? And she doesn't want to say shit. And he's like, Dr. Senator's taking care of it. So Dr. Senator is going to go down to the jailhouse to bail him out. But before he gets there, the cops come into the holding cell where the guys are talking about how, so one of them's scared because he's never been in jail before, being the son, and others like, oh, we'll see what happens, blah, blah, blah. And then some deputies come in and close the windows, and they think, oh, shit, and they're building you up to think that they're about to kill all of them, and instead Josto walks in. And basically tells him how it's going to be. You're going to do what we say or run out of town, blah, blah, blah. And he's, of course, not intimidating in the slightest. They leave. And so Dr. Senator arrives to bail them out. And so there's that. Loy, meanwhile, goes with Zero, Fada's son, to Thurman's house. Because to confront, he knocks on the door, and, Thurman, Ethel's father, answers. And he's like, oh, Loy, hi. He's like, you need to invite me inside, Thurman. Which is great. And they're preparing for a birthday party for Ethel, who's still at school. And so he goes in to sit at the table, and the wife's really scared because she doesn't really know what this is about. And he's like, you're really something, Thurman. You make this deal for me that I'm going to give you this loan to help you out. You then steal my money and then try and pay me back with my money. That's really something. And the wife is surprised because she has no idea what he's talking about. And he's like, oh, yeah, I looked it up. I know your sister. Yeah, she broke out of jail and she came here. I know what happened. Killed a couple of my guys and stole my money. And Thurman's trying to apologize, saying, well, I've never done this before. I don't know what to do when you owe money. I should have asked where the money came from. And she's like, Mr. Cannon, please. He's like, no, we're past, please. We're at, yes, sir. Yes, master. Yes, I ain't going to kill you. That's where we're at now. He's like, today you're going to hand me over the deed to this business. And you're going to do whatever I tell you. Otherwise, I'm going to paint the room with you and wait for your daughter to come home. And oh yeah. There's nothing they could do to get out. At one point, the mom tried to offer Zero cookies, saying, "Oh, is that your son? I'll get him cookies." And he's like, Does that look like my son? And he's like, I hated him. And like, what? I traded my own son to the Italians for power. And I sleep well at night. I sleep like a baby. My wife cries herself to sleep every night. And it's like he's letting them know that, no bullshit and whatever. So they have to agree because there's nothing else they could do. So then he leaves. And Ethel, meanwhile, has taken the opportunity to go to the hotel where Zelmare and Swanee or whatever the names are hiding out.
Yeah.
And she knocks on the door and they're kind of suspicious, but they open it and they see her and they say, well, next time use this code or whatever, so we know it's you. And like, did you bring any food? We ate all the the saltines the other night and it's not safe to go out. She's like, well, I have a few things here. So they're sitting down and they're talking and she's like, well, I don't understand because Ethel doesn't really know what they were in jail for or what's going on. And she's like, well, we're not criminals. It's like, are you guys criminals? Like, no, we're not criminals. Criminals, we're outlaws. Because criminals and good, honest people are the same. She's like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, they both play the game. They pay their tax. They both have to pay their taxes and obey the law. Blah blah blah. Good, honest people have one way of doing it. Criminals have the other way of doing it, but they're still doing it. They're both working the grind and that kind of thing. She's like, we ain't that. We're outlaws. She's like, what? You're not honest or anything? She's like, I haven't been an honest woman since my uncle cornered me in the barn since when I was 9 years old. It's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, so this is kind of intense. And so Ethel leaves, saying Giles will try and help or whatever. She goes back to school to find that the principal has called her into the office, and he's very furious. And he's saying, oh, I've educated black girls here for you to cause the problem, blah, blah. And we see that Deffy is there, Marshall Deffy. And they're granted privacy, and Deffy basically threatens to have her expelled if she doesn't reveal where her aunt is. And he also threatens that, I've seen things that are going on around here with that funeral home, and I'm going to snoop around and stuff. And so she gets kind of scared, and realizing she has no other option, she tells Deffy where they're staying. However, by the time Deffy gets to the hotel, we find that the cannons have already gotten there first and forced the ladies out, saying, okay, you work for us now. We won't kill you, and you'll work for us, and that's the deal. And so Deffy breaks into the hotel room, finds they're not there. He looks out the window, and he sees them being ushered away into a car. And so he's like, okay, so he's kind of, left out of this or whatnot. Meanwhile, we catch up with Dr. Senator finally. And he goes to see the guy, the commissary, the emissary who he normally visits from the Fadas when they're meeting at the diner.
Elba.
Instead, he gets there and meets Calamita and Gaetano. And they've already had an interesting day. They went to a restaurant, like a little bar cafe place. Man. And yeah, they ordered coffee, and the kid brings them, like some 20-year-old maybe or whatever, brings them coffee, and he's like, Gaetano's like, what is this shit? And he's like, well, it's coffee with milk and sugar. And he's like, that's the problem with this country, Gaetano says. Everybody thinks they're going to be president one day, so they ain't working like the job they have today. He's like, in Italy, if you offered a coffee, they make it like a Michelangelo, the masterpiece. That's what they do over there. And he's like, well, sir, did you saying you don't like the coffee or whatever? And so Gaetano just gets up and he shoots the kid dead, and then he shoots the bartender who'd already been giving him dirty looks because he's, white guy that racist or whatever. So he kills both of them, and Calamita is like, why did you do that? And he doesn't he kind of does this weird little dance that he's a total psycho. Like, the guy's not right in the head. And so they've had this pretty psychotic day already. So when Dr. Senator shows up and he asks, where's this guy? And Calamita's being all cocky with him, like, oh, that time's over. And you're going to do what we say. You're going to run out of town, and you're not going to complain about it, blah, blah, blah. And we're done talking. And Senator's just standing there staring at him, and he's not going to give him the time of day. And Calamita's like, well, can you give me some semblance, a hint that you understand the English language? And Dr. Senator's like, I thought you said you were done talking. Like, what? You said you were done talking, and then you continued talking. And kind of sitting in the corner, pouring all these nuts and stuff on this little sundae that he's eating, trying to control himself. And the Dr. Senator basically tells Calamita like it is. Like, I don't know how they do it back in Italy, but over here, respect is earned. And you ain't earned shit. You're just a bunch of little boys making a mess that I'm going to have to clean up someday. And he just storms out. He just doesn't want to hear it. And then the camera tracks on Doc Senator as he's walking away, and you hear the door open, and he knows they're coming out. And he's like, And he turns around to see what it is, and Calamita just shoots Doc Senator dead, once in the stomach and then in the head. And then Calamita shoots Senator's driver.
Mm-hmm.
And then Gaetano comes out and kind of taps Calamita on the shoulder and is kind of happy with, pleased with what he did. And then it kind of has a crossfade to the cannons showing up that night. And Loy is just completely devastated because Dr. Senator was his right-hand man, his most trusted confidant. And they're like, well, we can't just leave him here in the street. And Loy's like, no, we got to, because you hear the sirens coming, and they leave. And that's the part where you would think things are going to explode. And because usually the 6th episode of Fargo is the real action-packed one of the seasons. And it's surprisingly, it's a bit tame when we get into the 6th episode. Yeah, because we begin with just the birthday party that Thurman and his wife are throwing for Ethel. And they're having cake, they're having a time, whatever. And then we go back to Gaetano, and he's like practicing
stabbing.
He's practicing stabbing on like one of those torso things where you see when you're measuring a dress or whatever. And he looks out the window and he sees Swanee and Zelmare showing up. Like, he thinks, they ordered prostitutes or whatever. They're kind of giggling about it. And so they're waiting, and then they hear a commotion downstairs no sooner than the girls are inside. And he sees flashes through the vents and hears the gunfire and all the chaos. So he sends his buddy out into the hallway to see what's going on as he's getting to load his weapon. And he's waiting, and the gunfire kind of stops for a while, and he hears some steps. And he looks and wondering which door they're going to come out of. And he sees the handle knob turning, and he fires like 5 times through the door, only to see when the door opens that it was his buddy who he sent into the hall. And you could tell Gaetano's really upset about this and shocked. But then no sooner than his buddy collapses dead, we see that Swanee is standing behind him as the silhouette of Zelmare is coming towards him. And Swanee just holds up the gun and shoots him in the back of the head, right along through here, slashing pretty deep gash into the side. And he falls over and he looks like he's dead as a doornail. And I actually was like, oh shit, because I thought that, wow, they did it.
Yeah.
And instead, Zelmare's like, you weren't supposed to kill him. She's like, well, you didn't say he was as big as a house. So then they go to haul him away because, he's still breathing. I'm like, bullshit. Like that guy, that went, not just, it didn't simply graze the side of the head. That went through, he's done.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently he's still alive. And somehow they managed to drag him out of the house to the car, even though they could barely move him from upstairs, which is a bit ridiculous. And it's established in this episode that Deafy has been spying on people. So he's kind of, keeping tabs. And he tells Otis at one point that, well, I'm closing in on him or whatever. And Otis is sweating bullets because he just wants to get rid of Deafy. So,
well, we get the story from Otis as well. In terms of what actually happened with his minesweeper. He has this little shrine with porcelain dolls that Duffy's checking out and asks about the picture of a girl that's above it. And he's like, oh, you collect these? Who's the girl? And it's like, is that your wife? And intended. And it's like, what happened? She died. How did she die? Tells the story of how she was raped and murdered, strangled to death with her own panties. And that Otis got the message when he was in France as a minesweeper. And the story that was recounted by Loy was actually a response to finding out that his fiancée had been raped and murdered. And so that's when he clocked out and sort of, again, developed his OCD with the death of a colonel. Yeah,
that's what happened. That's right. And that's another thing is that Loy at the beginning of the 6th episode kidnaps Otis and brings him to the house, or kidnaps him. Well, not really, because he was still in his house. They just pull him in a bag or whatever, and knock him out. And so Loy shows up and he says, "You work for me now. You don't know what it's like to be owned. Well, now you will figure out what that means to actually be owned." And he makes a parable about, imagine if all these little dolls here, these little porcelain dolls, were to come alive and become citizens of this apartment. And they were upset about the fact that you've been owning them all this time. It's like, well, now I own you, and this is what you're going to do. You're going to, I can't remember what he ordered him to do, but he said, go back and get his son. He's like, go retrieve my son. He's like, how am I supposed to do that? He's like, You're a cop. Bend the rules. Do whatever you need to do. Go get my son and bring him back here, or I'm going to kill you. You're going to be done with this. He's like, so he's like, okay. So he leaves. We see that Gaetano has been brought to the warehouse, Loy's warehouse, and they've got it. He's like chained to this chair with a chain around his neck tied to the wall, and you see his one of Loy's guys there, kind of skinny, like taping up his fists. And Loy's like, "You ever heard of Sugar Ray Robinson?" Yeah, that wasn't his real name, but blah blah blah. And he starts telling one of his great stories again. And he's like, "Yeah, you might see this guy and think he's skinny, but that doesn't matter. He's got reach." And Gaetano's not impressed. He's like, "Nah, whatever. Do your work. I don't care." And he's like, you probably thought everything was going your way. You could kill it, blah, blah, but then you killed Dr. Senator. And Gaetano laughs at this because at first he was kind of listening and taking it seriously, but now he thinks it's hysterical to find out that that's why Loy is there. And so then the guy starts beating him up. And of course, that's when the camera cuts away. Otis, meanwhile, shows up back at the Fada house to get the son. And he's stopped from getting the son because Calamita comes up behind him. He's like, the boss wants you. Not here, though, at the house. Or at the
club.
Yeah, at the club. And it's like, you're going to go or we're going to kill you. And he laughs, like, just kidding. And so he leaves with him because they put him in the back of the car and he has no choice. So he arrives at the club and he goes in to meet Josto. And Josto tells him that, look, you're going to have to find out where Gaetano is. He's been kidnapped. He got a message. Josto got a message earlier in the day from his the other guy who came back from New York, the normal person that Dr. Senator would engage with. And he's like, well, New York, meaning the 5 families, want you to make peace with the cannons, put an end to this within 2 weeks, and they want you to deal with your brother, but in a good way. It's clear that the mafia favors the brother. And he's like, why do they favor him over me? I'm the capo. He's like, well, your brother has friends in Italy, and so the mafia likes him. And that's when Calamita tells him that, boss, your brother's missing. And he didn't really want to hear that. He's like, no, I'm busy. I go away. I can wait. And he's like, boss, your brother's missing, and they killed Powell. And he's like, why? And he's like, because of Dr. Senator. And the emissary's like, what? They killed Dr. Senator? And Johnson's like, yeah, he was executed by this dipshit right here, being Calamita, probably on Gaetano's orders. And he's like, what? You ordered this? He's like, look, let's not focus on who ordered what. It's just, it happened, and Gaetano's gone. Like, he's dead. Let's be fine with it. But when Calamita told him that, oh, well, the 5 families want him, and he's like, oh, geez, he's super stressed about it. So, yeah. See,
there we go. Herc 130 in the chat. Oh, my God. I just had a sympathetic yawn. It's good to see you.
That I yawned too. And so,
hey, Lemon.
And so Josto decides he's going to play hardball as well. So when Otis shows up, he says, okay, Otis, you're going to go get this is what we're going to do. You're going to go find Gaetano. And Calamita, I don't think you really understand what loyalty means, because you keep saying you're following me, but you keep taking orders from my brother. So he tells the emissary, you take him with you and teach him a thing or two about loyalty. And then Josto makes another call saying, I need to speak with Rabbi Milligan, but make sure that Rabbi is the only one, comes alone, doesn't bring the kid. I'm like, okay. So this other guy goes to pick up the kid, and first he goes to Rabbi and tells him the boss wants you down at the club in the alley. He's like, okay. And he says, no, you got to leave the kid here. And Rabbi's like, okay, remember, kid. He's like, yeah, I know. If you don't come back, you're dead or in jail. He's like, great. He's like, can I finish watching the show? And the other girl in there, the sister or whatever, she's like, oh, don't worry. I'll see to it that he gets back upstairs when they finish watching the show. And Rabbi's like, okay. And he leaves. But the guy who gave him the message to leave and go meet Josto wants to take the kid with him. And the sister's like, well, what's going on? Why do you want to take the kid? And he's like, And then she's like, oh, geez. And she says her prayers. And he takes them away in the car and they drive off. Rabbi, meanwhile, shows up at this meeting in the alley. And Josto's like, look, you're needed up. You're back in. Which I thought was interesting the way he phrased that. You're back in, almost like he was, I don't know, like being punished or something by being forced to watch the kid. He's like, look, you're going upstairs. You're back in. You're going to go upstairs and get your orders and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, what about the kid? He's like, oh, no, we're done with that.
Yeah.
And once they leave, Rabbi's smart enough and starts running a scenario through his head, and he knows what that means. So then we cut back to the guy who's been tasked with taking the boy out to pasture, as it were, and he drives him to this old, what was it, like an institution that's been closed, or a camp or something like that.
I think it was like a camp. They say it was a prisoner of war camp, or I
Okay,
think.
yeah. So he's walking him through the camp, and it's all the snow's everywhere. Some of the buildings have fallen apart, and he's speaking about life in the winter and the weather in like this poetic way, trying to make the kid happy. And then he sends him down this stairwell to this little ruin where he shows how he had where he carved his name on the wall from the old POW camp to show him. And as he's doing that, he takes the kid's going down there looking at it, and then the guy takes his gloves off. He gets out his gun and he's hesitating, and he really is having a hard time with this, that because he really doesn't want to do it, because you can tell that killing kids is not something that's in his rapport. But before he has a chance to make the decision, Rabbi just shoots him dead in the back, and he's like, yeah, kid, you better look at it, because this is what men do. He's like, come on, we're getting out of here. He's like, back home. He's like, no, it's not safe there. It's not safe at your other home either. We're going. Because Rabbi, he got mad. I mean, he went back to the house, and when the lady, whatever her I can't remember if that was Josto's sister.
I think that was Antoon's wife.
Yeah, and she was, Rabbi grabbed onto her, shaking her, demanding to know where she was. And when she screamed, the other guy in the back says, what's that? And Rabbi pulls his gun and shoots him in the arm. So it's like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
So Rabbi's like, really, he's very much in on protecting the kid. Like, understands how even though he chose to betray his own family in the end, that he still is very respectful and understanding of this situation and doesn't like it. It's like, no, I'm not going to let you get off because of their bullshit, basically. He's going to help them. And that's kind of where we're left, except with the Aretta storyline is Dr. Harvard receives the anonymous letter, and he calls her into the office to see what, the fact that somebody has sent an anonymous letter talking about how Aretta attends the funerals of her patients, retains keepsakes from them, and that she's been fired from multiple places because of all these deaths, and they don't want to charge her. It's just easier to make her go away. And as she's walking into his office to meet with him about this, you hear this other patient kind of groaning in the hallway, and she's like, and the Dr. Harvard's like, is that guy ever going to shut up? And she's like, oh, he's got the gout, sir. It's really bad. And so he reads off these accusations, and he's like, do you attend the funerals of the patients? She's like, well, of course, it's the Christian thing to do. He's like, do you take keepsakes? He's like, oh, no, that's ridiculous. Why would I do such a thing? It's so horrible.
I don't even know how to spell crime.
Yeah, and he's like, she's like, can I see the letters? He's like, no, you can't. And he's like, well, who sent them? He's like, anonymous. He's like, oh, see, there you go. It's just somebody trying to pick a fight or whatever. He's like, yeah, I've seen rivalries in my time, and it can get pretty catty, cat fights and that kind of thing. But it's clear to her that he's not fully believing that this is just he doesn't think this is a crank. He thinks there's something to this. And so she leaves the office a bit upset. But then later, when she's sitting in that annoying patient's room and he's groaning again, she's thinking about it and trying not to think about it. And the episode ends with her walking out of the room and he's silent. So you know that she's killed him, which means that she's now going to have to deal with the boss, because I think he's, obviously thinking about what that means as well.
Well, Dr. Harvard is the one that we're supposed to be. He's going to die. Like, he has to, because he turned away the senior fodder. Hey, Taylor Swift, greater than Disney, Star Wars, and MCU. Hey, Matt G, thank you for the wave.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if I missed anything with those two, but that's basically the basic brushstrokes of everything that happens in these two episodes.
Well, and that's. Yeah, and I'm absolutely picking up what you're throwing down about dealing with the vast cast of characters, from Antoon and Elba to Josto, Gaetano, Loy. I guess a couple of them are dropping off. The weird thing is that
I didn't even know who Powell was. When he says Powell got shot, I guess Powell is the one that Gaetano shot accidentally in the doorway. Okay, because that's another thing. I still can't follow all the names of these characters because they're not mostly memorable enough to keep track of who's named what.
Well, it's kind of an interesting sort of revelation to Mayflower, Arietta, is that she kind of has an idea that it is Ethelreda who sent the letter.
Right.
There is like a flash of understanding because it's like it was written by a girl, because you can tell from the calligraphy. And so she's kind of piecing it together, but we still have to see.
She hasn't found Ethel's notebook inside the closet yet.
Right.
Where all the keepsakes are. Or the trophies, I should say.
Well, I'm wondering if that's going to be something where is she going to get that letter because she wants the letter that outlined her sort of suspicious behavior. And I'm wondering if it's going to be a compare the notebook to the letter as an actual.
Right. And I'm also suspicious as to why Ethelrita hasn't wondered where her notebook is yet. Like, it seems
Right.
like she would have noticed by now that, oh, I'm missing this. And she's smart enough that she would have remembered that, I think.
Well, and as Fargo goes, from what I've observed on season 1, season 5, and the film, usually the thing that's happening to Thurston is the thing that we would be paying attention to. But it's so, like, back burner, third priority that it's like, okay, I can see where the Fargo is happening in this season of Fargo, but it's much more about that gang war. Now, you said in season 2 they do a gang war. I hope, like, this one's not bad, but I gotta look for the Fargo in it. I'm hoping season 2, it's more Fargo forefront.
Oh, but season 2, all the characters are Fargo forefront, and that's why it works. And they're so memorable for that reason. It is not convoluted. Whereas here, it's just like you said, the notion that, okay, they have these simple people in a funeral home who are already in debt. They've taken a loan from a gangster. They don't really have a plan to necessarily pay it back yet. It's going to take a while. And now their convict sister shows up and says, oh, I'm going to help you, steals the money and pays back. Like, that's a very Fargo type story, but it's not, you're right, it's not taking center stage. Meanwhile, you have Aretta, the serial killer, which, okay, yes, we understand that she killed the Fada crime, but nobody really knows that, so whatever. And then we have Ethelrita, who seemed like she was going to be more or less our protagonist, who was going to be paying attention to everything, but she's kind of kicked off to the side now, so whatever. And then Gaetano has been like a threat, but again, I just find him to be so cartoonish that I just don't. And again, the fact that, I mean, those two women went in there and just shot all these people and shot Gaetano in the head, dragged him out, which would have taken a while. No law enforcement response whatsoever. And it's like, how hard would it be for the Cannons to... Because Lloyd has known for a while now that this is Gaetano who's causing all the problems. He knows that Jocelyn doesn't want... It's like, why have you been waiting this long to just do the obvious? Like, get rid of the big fat idiot who's the dumb ape who's been causing all the problems. And given how easy it is apparently for them to get people to get away with these mass shootings and shit. Like, no cops showed up when the two convicts robbed Loy's shop and killed the 3 guys. So it's like... True. If the cops are totally sleeping on the job when actual crimes are being committed, it's like, why? Like, I don't buy this as being a threat. Like, if the gang wanted to deal with this, they could both deal with each other like that. It's like, and so, whereas the other seasons, it feels palpable that the villains have to actually work around law enforcement to skirt them because, again, in previous seasons of Fargo, law enforcement are major main characters, and that's not the case here. Even Duffy's been spying for quite a while now. He can see there's something going on with this mob thing, but he's not really doing anything about it. He's just kind of sitting around watching. It's like, maybe this stuff will come together at some point, but will I care enough by the time that finally happens?
Well, and it is, yeah. I'm agreeing. I'm enjoying it. It's kind of funny, this only being the third season that I've seen, and it's like, if they called it anything other than Fargo, I'd be so in. But I can if I squint, I can see Fargo, but this is much more of the. It's messy. I find this season to be messy, but pleasurable based on the performances. But
and that's another thing. It's like certain
we're more than halfway.
What's the thing? Certain characters like Lloyd Cannon, Dr. Senator, and even Aretta May's kind of interesting, but because they're having such a large ensemble, we barely get to spend time with any of these people. Even Duffy, I kind of like him a lot too. But they keep having to cut to all these other characters, and the ones I feel that they're putting front and center are just the main plot premise just isn't very interesting. It's like, I don't know why they felt the need in this series to, let's tell the origin story of how the Kansas City Mafia became a racially integrated corporate-run mob rather than... Because nobody questioned whether there were families before then. It's just like, so why are you doing this? It's like going 29 years back in time from the last time we met the Kansas City Mob, which is in 1979 season 2, to tell this other story. And I get the whole layout that we had in the beginning about the theme of immigration, how these immigrants shouldn't be fighting each other. They should be turning against the actual bad guys like Aretta, who's the epitome of Minnesota nice, evil white lady immigrant, that kind of thing. But it's not. I feel that theme isn't really carrying as we're getting this. The 5th episode was called "The Birthplace of Civilization," sixth episode was called. God, what was it called? I have it right here. I can't remember. Let's see.
Oh, I had it.
I got it right here on Wikipedia. Let's pull this up. So,
All right.
Birthplace of Civil. Yeah, it was called Camp Elegance.
Which is where they take the kid at the end, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's like, again, the thematic idea that you're prisoner of war camp, because you have the narrative that there's two types of prisoners when he's talking to Otis, when he says I own you now, that there's the types behind bars and the one then you, like, you're now, like, I own you now, just like he said, I own, Thurman, I own your family now because you stole my money and this kind of thing. And so, yeah, and then even like Rabbi says to the kid, you can't go home because it's not safe there, even with this mob war about to break out. And now I can't go home because I shot that guy and disobeyed orders. And so it is like, Camp Elegance, which is, again, an ironic name because it's a POW camp. And so we don't know where Rabbi's going to take the kid now. But it's, and frankly, there's not really many characters to really root for in this season. Because, I mean, Ethel isn't involved enough in the show to say I need to root for her, because it doesn't feel like anything bad is happening to her that she's going to go against these crime families. She's just kind of there. And Thurman and his wife, I guess I could root for them because they're good people. Mm-hmm. But again, they're sort of, like you said, they've been put to the back burner. So I don't really care about which crime family comes out on top, because Lloyd Cannon's kind of an asshole. Like he says, I traded my son for power, and he clearly doesn't give a shit. He's like, I sleep well at night like a baby, and my wife cries herself to sleep. He has no cares in the world for that. I cared a lot more about Dr. Senator, but I'm like, I can't really get behind you. It's like, yes, I get it. You fled the Jim Crow South. That's horrible. But for you to be that callous towards your own son, and it's like, I don't really. And then the Fada's like, Josto's an idiot. He's not cut out for this. It'd be kind of like what would happen if Frida were to have become the capo and the Godfather. It's like, this isn't going to work. And then so it's like, I don't care about the rest of the Italians. Like, maybe the guy who Dr. Senator used to do business with, he seems like he's an understanding guy, but I don't feel he's going to be anything in the show. So it's like, the only thing I can root for is for Oretta Mae's downfall. But as evil as she is, again, I feel that she's entertaining enough that I'm not really chomping at the bit to see her get killed. So I don't feel much from a season. It's like, I feel that Duffy could be really exciting and fun, but they're not doing anything with him either. So, and I don't really want him to succeed in locking up, Swanee and Delmare, because they seem like good people for the most part. Like, she's like, I haven't been innocent or honest since my uncle cornered me in the barn since I was 9 years old. And it's like, geez,
Well, they are guilty of multiple murders.
They are, but they were killing gangsters and stuff.
That's true. Well, no, there was a bank manager who was a father of three and the coach of the Little League or something.
Oh yeah.
And so there have been innocents, but like it seems that there are moments, at least in these last two episodes, because it has been building to what seems to be a moment of catharsis or release in the tension of the show. We do get the death of Dr. Senator, and it's almost like, yes, it's sad, but there are no repercussions.
Right.
Like,
it just kind of,
no one really retaliated over it, except beating up Gaetano. And
Gaetano and killed Powell, and it sounds like they shot quite a few other people downstairs that we didn't hear about.
Okay, that makes sense. Hearing that from downstairs is by no means as exciting as watching the outside of the building when Lorne Malvo was going through on his.
Oh, exactly, 100%. Especially since, like you said, it doesn't feel like it really accomplished anything other than Gaetano being missing. It's like, okay, so a few other guys got off. So what, Mm-hmm. And now the real retaliation is what Josto's saying, go get rid of Cannon's son. We're done with this, and how that didn't pan out.
Well, then also Josto is, he's quietly rubbing his hands together and saying, this is my chance to get rid of Gaetano. Like, it doesn't matter if he's gone.
Yeah, you can tell he doesn't really care. He doesn't care. Like, he says, why does the mafia like Gaetano? I'm the one who's the capo. I'm the one doing the work here, blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, he has friends back in Italy. You don't. It's like, and so there's that. So it's like, but again, there's not, like, even the bad characters in season 2 were colorful enough to be exciting to watch, or the flares would be much better. Like you said, watching the outside camera pan outside the building as Malvo's wiping out the Fargo crime syndicate. is so much more interesting than watching Gaetano kind of standing there looking at the flashing lights or whatever. I admit I was shocked when he got shot. I didn't think something like that was going to happen that early, and I still think that if you've already broken our immersion by saying he survived that, I'm expecting him to get away or get rescued. Like, I don't think, because he's the main antagonist, arguably, for everything going wrong in this season. So I don't think he's just going to be finished that early. I mean, it'd be nice if they took a bold move and maybe did, but I expect him to break out at some point. But I'm still not that invested.
Yeah, and it does, having, seen a couple of James Bond movies from time to time, an easily escapable room being softened up by a thug. Like, come on, Loy, I have a gun. Let's take him out back. We'll shoot him now. Boom, done.
Yeah.
And so it just seemed like there would be more of a retaliation. And now, like with Dr. Senator dead, maybe we're going to get in these last 4 episodes more going on with the rabbi and the kid.
5 episodes. There's 11 episodes this season.
Oh, 5 episodes left. And so with that, like, now are we going to return to that setup that we had with the trading of the sons? Is that going to become more prevalent now that everything else is very, very broken?
Yeah.
But it was fine. 2 episodes, two episodes down. I don't know. I don't really have a whole heck of a lot to say about it this week because, as I mentioned, 2 episodes, 2 things happened. A lot of people moving around.
Yeah, Dr. Senator dying, and then Gaetano, wow, he got shot and taken, and then maybe the Rabbi Milligan thing where he decides to stick his neck out for the kid. But again, it's kind of crawling along, and we're losing track of our characters. And
losing a little bit of the tension as well, like with the notebook in Arietta's sort of poison closet.
Yeah.
But well, hopefully it'll kick into gear next week. But a mid-season lull I'm okay with. I just hope it gets some more juice.
Yeah, hopefully it really has to next week.
Perfect.
Anybody in the chat?
Yeah, we got Lemon, Matt G, and Herc. We're all here. Thank you so much for being here, guys. And Kat had a blast today on Antiderivative Jill's channel for her 2-year anniversary. Thanks for hanging out there.
Yeah, it's fun.
Sweet. That it? We're done? Just a quick one. Rip it off like a Band-Aid?
Yeah, you betcha.
Oh, I'm not ready. I gotta press the button.